Hari Om. Om. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Gunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvina Vaditamastu Mavid Vishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May the Divine Being look over us lovingly as a mother and father. May the Divine Being support and nourish us as a mother and father. May we have the strength and skill to study together the art of spirituality. May no misunderstandings arise amongst us. Om, peace, peace. Peace be unto us and to all joyous and suffering beings everywhere. So we're studying Realizing God. Hello, Shara. Hello, Stephen. Namaste.
Hello, Brother Shankara. Hello, everyone.
So we will begin. We're in the middle of this talk. And the first sentence is, where is God? Every religion points out that he is the very soul of your soul, nearer than hands and feet. To quote from the Gospel according to St. John, the light shineth in darkness, but the darkness comprehended it not. The light shineth in darkness, but the darkness comprehended it not. There is that Atman, that Brahman, who is Satchitananda, pure love, abiding joy, infinite happiness, immortal life. That is your inner nature, your true being. That is what you are, but that has been covered by ignorance, darkness. And that this ignorance brings forth first ego, then attachment and aversion, then clinging to this surface life. So I'm going to read that again. It's just so uplifting. There is that Atman, that Brahman, who is Satchitananda, pure love, abiding joy, infinite happiness, immortal life. That is your inner nature, your true being. That is what you are, but that has been covered by ignorance. And this ignorance brings forth first ego, then attachment and aversion, then clinging to this surface life. All of this ego, attachment and aversion, clinging to this surface life, they're all because of our belief, based in our ignorance, that we are the reflection, not that which is being reflected. So we think we are a separate being. There is ahamkara, only one I maker, only one supreme eternal ego, and yet reflected in this action and experience suit that we wear, we think, no, that is me. I am a separate being. This is ignorance. And then that separate being develops likes and dislikes. Attachment and aversion. And then once we are in that state of attachment and aversion, we don't want to leave it. So we cling to the surface life. In the Bhagavad Gita, Sri Krishna says, the uncontrolled mind does not guess that Atman, or God, is present within the shrine of your own heart. How can it meditate if you don't guess that there is something more, that living presence, as Swami Prabhavananda called it? If you don't guess that that living presence is within the shrine of your own heart, how can you meditate? Without meditation, where is peace? Without peace, where is happiness? And over, it doesn't matter what we study, it always comes back to we must learn to control the mind. And learning to control the mind, why? We need to control the mind so it doesn't think of itself as the action and experience suit, so it doesn't develop these attachments and aversions and clinging. We have to control the mind. And over and again, we're told the way to do this is to practice meditation. It really is a series, as described in Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, starting with contemplation, then concentration, then meditation. So Krishna says, if you don't have any sense that that's there, how can you meditate? Without meditation, where is peace? Without peace, where is happiness? What do we want? We want happiness. We want freedom. We want contentment. Not to be found except in momentary bursts outside. And even that isn't really, as Swami Prabhavananda points out, when we satisfy a desire and the mind is momentarily calm, that which is within, because the mind is no longer standing in the way, that blissful being, that Atman, bursts forth, and you experience the bliss, you experience the sense of expansion, infinitude, and so on. And you think, oh, it's because I satisfied the desire. No, it's because you calmed the mind just for a moment. So when we learn to calm the mind for longer and longer moments, then we discover, oh, this is who I am. This is what I am. So returning to Swami Prabhavananda, that's the end of the quote from the Gita. So Swami Prabhavananda asks, so what is the way? Simple, to discipline our own minds. And he says simple, but it's not easy. So what is the way? Simple, to discipline our own minds. There is no easy way, my friends. You have to have patience and perseverance. Old habits and tendencies will try to gain control over you, but create new habits and give a fight in this battlefield of life. That fight has to go on within your own self. And you go on. That fight has to go on within your own self, and you will win. This is Swami Prabhavananda's promise. It's also Krishna's. It's also Sri Ramakrishna's. There is no failure in spiritual life as long as you keep up the struggle. Have patience and perseverance and practice, practice, practice. What does he mean by practice, practice, practice? He means every day. I mean, you've heard me tell the stories of Pablo Casals and Yehudi Menuhin and these great musicians. The reason they excel so is they practice, practice, practice. The same thing is true of us. If we are to become that expert yogi, that expert dancer in the realm of spiritual life, We must practice, practice, practice. It is very difficult to understand, even intellectually, exactly what peace means and what it is we are seeking. We seek it without knowing what it is. There is some idea in our minds and hearts, but it is not clear. Of course, the word peace conveys the idea of a state of quiet and tranquility of spiritual contentment. But what that really is, we cannot define or express. Let's let that sink in. We know what we're seeking. We know it intuitively. We know it, as Swami Vivekananda says, all the knowledge is within. It remains only to be uncovered. But because it is timeless, changeless, it is therefore beyond the scope of language to express it. But what peace really means, we cannot define or express. It is something we can feel and experience, but not within the domain of the senses. That is what Christ calls the peace that passeth understanding. In Sanskrit, samadhi. The intellect cannot grasp of it. The intellect cannot grasp or conceive of it, yet we seek it. Let's let that sink in again. We don't know what it is that we're seeking intellectually in our senses, but we know it, so we keep seeking it. As long as we keep seeking on the outside, as long as we keep seeking through the senses, we're doomed to disappointment. Doomed to disappointment. And no matter how many billions of dollars you have, if you're oriented toward wanting money, there will never be enough. So it's just, the secret is that it is an open secret, but it's nevertheless a secret. We must turn within. The intellect cannot grasp of it or conceive of it, yet we seek it. A simpler understanding is that it is synonymous with union with God. It is the same as experiencing God's face. It is the same as experiencing God face to face. In that sense, peace and God are identical. Peace, love, all God, they are identical. To approach it in a negative way, Kapila defined it as the complete cessation of suffering and misery. It's the same way that the Buddha described it, you may remember. To approach it in a negative way, Kapila defined the state we're seeking as the complete cessation of suffering and misery. The wall does not suffer, and animals on the lower scale of life have less suffering. At one time, I thought of contentment as the peace of a contented cow. That is not the ideal, simply because the cow doesn't know, so it has no idea. They're just being that. There is a peace that is positive, but we first have to eliminate all causes of suffering. If you study the lives of the great mystics, and do I ever recommend that? And you've all heard me recommend a book called Love Poems from God. This is a great way to study the lives of 12 great mystics across the centuries, across the traditions. If you study the lives of great mystics, they all call this peace ecstasy. They become intoxicated with joy. They experience waves of bliss striking them, something very definite and very positive. If you have any glimpse of what God is, you will know He is happiness, peace, joy, ananda. There is no word to convey the exact meaning of ananda, but in the Upanishads we read, from joy springs this universe, in joy dwells this universe, and unto joy goes back this universe. Taittiriya Upanishad. Nothing but joy. From joy everything come. From joy everything has come. And the anchorite, Julian of Norwich, a woman, she experienced visitations from Christ. Christ would come and see her in her cell, very small cell. He would come and sit with her, and he explained to her that the universe is born of love, exists in love, and goes back to love. It's exactly the same message as we're reading from the Upanishad, and it was just quoted by the Swami. Precisely the same message. And the only thing that stands between us and our knowledge of this, our realization of this, is our ignorance. Now, we can't think of ourselves as bad and wrong for having that ignorance. That ignorance comes with the package. It's designed into the package. But it's designed into the package is also the capability for dispelling that ignorance. Nothing but joy. From joy, everything has come out. When the mind is attached to the senses and sense pleasures, we have troubles and worries. Even our enjoyments and pleasures are not free from suffering and pain. Now, why is that? Because once we experience a pleasure, when we get some relief from our suffering and that blissful moment of ecstasy, well, we want it again. And we think that that particular experience, that particular pleasure will give it to us again. Oh, whoa. It just is not so. You may repeat the experience. You may repeat having that momentary bliss, that momentary joy. But it doesn't last. And so what other kind of suffering is? Because it doesn't last, we think something's wrong. Because we covet. We covet that which will give us joy. We're afraid we'll lose it. Oh, what will happen to me? What will happen to me? Suffering, suffering, suffering. Even our enjoyments and pleasures are not free from suffering and pain. Now, center that same mind in God. It will be quite different. You will be always in the sanctuary where nothing can affect you. Now, does that mean that nothing bad ever happens to the action and experience suit and the life around it? No, it doesn't mean that. But what it means is that your experience of it will be very different if your mind is centered in God, which is only done through the practice of contemplation, concentration, and meditation. You know what to do. It is very simple to know. It is very simple to know how to do it. But to do it is the difficulty. Our uncontrolled mind revolts against it. Our uncontrolled mind revolts against it. And though we seek happiness and peace, we cannot have them unless we learn to control the mind. In the Gita we read, when through the practice of yoga, the mind ceases its restless movements and becomes still, he realizes the Atman. This is, as I said, this is the testimony of all of those who have been there and returned. And they say, there's only one way. You must control the mind, still the mind. Then you experience it. How simple. It satisfies him entirely. Then he knows that infinite happiness, which can be realized by the purified heart, but is beyond the grasp of the senses. Utterly quiet, made clean of passion, the mind of the yogi knows that Brahman, his bliss is the highest. And every one of you who is sitting there in your home or office, wherever you are this morning, for this class, this is accessible to you. This can be a reality for you, if it isn't already a reality for you, to one degree or another. And so whatever you're doing that moves you in that direction, continue. Utterly quiet, made clean of passion, the mind of the yogi knows that Brahman, his bliss is the highest. In the higher scale of evolution, you suffer because you become more sensitive. And then there comes that great struggle to overcome all that suffering. You see, because as we evolve spiritually, we do become more sensitive. And so if we are not keeping up our practice at the same time, which is a shield against that suffering, we'll feel the pain of the world and the pain of the collective unconscious much more than an ordinary person. And you may have been born into this world sensitive in that way. And so it becomes necessary to learn to take refuge in the divine. You see, it is not merely the complete cessation of suffering, but there is, so on the one hand, it's not just the negative. You see, it is not merely the complete cessation of suffering, but there is a positive experience of joy and delight. Joy covers the whole universe. The fact is that everywhere, in the minutest atom, in the blade of grass, or as Shankara puts it, in the stump of a tree, from that pillar down to Brahma, the highest evolution, there is the presence of Brahman, of God. What is the nature of God? Ananda, bliss. And so that's the end of that talk. Good, we're just about at the half hour. Before we go on to the next one, I'm gonna give this a thought while we're having our conversation here. If you want to just go on to the next talk, which is Saints and Miracles, or if there is some particular talk in this book that you would like us to turn to, and go ahead. Balakrishna, as I remember, was the one who recommended the one that we just finished. So if you have some recommendation, please make it. In the meantime, while you're considering that, are there any comments or questions or observations that you want to make?
I'd like to ask a question.
Yes, Jenny.
contemplation, concentration, and meditation is always discussed as practice.
Mm-hmm.
And the goal of practice is to still the mind.
Yes.
So in a way, it feels like you have to still the mind before you're successful at contemplation, concentration, and meditation.
No.
The other way around.
No, Jenny. Contemplation is, you have that book, I know, that book, Love Poems from God.
Yes.
Okay. When you read one of those poems and you sit and let it sink in, now you've done the Shravana part.
Mm-hmm.
You've heard this great truth from one of these saints. This is contemplation now.
Okay.
You're looking at it, you're evaluating it, you're saying, isn't this inspiring? It may even bring you to tears. Something in you recognizes the truth that is so beautifully expressed in their testimony. And so you contemplate it. Then comes concentration. Concentration is manana. This is the manana part, where you've taken it into your mind and you're really focusing on it. And you're focusing on the difference between that truth and the way you normally think and behave. The way you normally think, speak, and behave. So you're comparing that. You're concentrating on it. This is object-oriented concentration as defined by Patanjali. You are opening up the truth of what you have heard by focusing on it, keeping your mind coming back to it. And the way to keep your mind coming back to it is to compare it to the way you normally think, act, and speak. So that you then slowly and slowly become convinced that the higher truth will be more practical and more appropriate for you. Now, there's another way of concentration, and for those who take an initiation from a Swami in the Ramakrishna order, you're given a mantra. Mm-hmm. Now, the mantra does this work for you. It does the work of manana for you. I'll explain that to you privately if you wish. Okay. Just exactly how that works. But it'll take more time than we have the rest of the hour. The reason being that the spiritual treasure of Sri Ramakrishna and the other great saints whose lives he embodied and studied, all of that spiritual treasure and power is contained in the mantra. Okay. And so concentrating on the mantra, returning your mind back and back and back to where you just say the mantra continuously without interruption for periods of time. That's concentration. So those are two different kinds of concentration. The one which I defined as manana, the other is mantra. Both of these lead to meditation. Meditation means that something happens and what is contained within the truth that you've been concentrating on begins to flower within you. And so your mind is automatically drawn to it and thereby stilled because of the experience of Satchidananda that you access through meditation. And in the beginning, that lasts for very brief periods of time. Over time, they extend until you have meditated to the point of achieving samadhi. And there are thousands of kinds of samadhi, as Sri Ramakrishna points out. But the technical definition is that you meditate continuously for 12 times 2 minutes, 20 seconds. Is that right? 24 seconds? So yeah, 2 minutes, you meditate 12 times 2 minutes, 24 seconds, whatever that works out into minutes. You automatically move into samadhi.
So, Brother Shankara, is the only real form of self-effort the concentration?
Yes, meditation, well, no, contemplation is also self-effort. Contemplation,
Right. Okay. Right.
Contemplation is contemplation is deciding that this is worthy of your attention. You know, this is why reading books like the Gita, the Upanishads, love poems from the saints, they offer you things that are manifestly worth your attention, deserve your attention. So, but then the concentration part is where you begin to focus that attention. First, you decide it deserves your attention because it's manifestly more appropriate and more fulfilling. You can see the possibility of more fulfillment and appropriateness in the truth that you learn rather than the way you normally act, speak, and think. So that's the continuum from contemplating it to concentrating on it to beginning to meditate. This is why people say they're meditating on something. No, they're not really meditating on something. They've been concentrating on something, and it shifts to meditation, which is a continuous experience of something, rather than meditating on it as in the sense of active effort. So the active effort is in contemplation and concentration that becomes meditation. This is why Patanjali says the first 6 limbs of yoga are something that you do. The last 2, meditation and samadhi, are something that happens to you.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, dear. It's a very, very, very good question. Anyone else?
Brother Shankara?
Yes, Swayam, dear.
So does concentration, contemplation, and meditation encompass everything that we have to practice, or are there other components to this practice?
Of course there are. Of course there are. But this is, we're talking about what is it when you move from the outward world to the inward world. The steps are contemplation, concentration, and meditation. But there's those other 6 steps. There's those other 6 limbs of yoga, as Patanjali pointed out, starting with the yamas and niyamas, the restraints, actively and consciously restraining your behavior. And then there's the observances, the niyamas. If you're going to restrain your behavior from being this way, what are you going to replace it with? Well, the observances are there. Patanjali lists the observances. We'll talk about this a little tomorrow. And then you learn asana. And you learn, you may not practice it according to Patanjali, but you learn pranayama. You may learn it through a different way. The Ramakrishna order Swamis recommend that you not practice breath control as such, that you practice what they teach you, and it results in pranayama, control of the breath or the life energy. And then pratyahara. Pratyahara means we think, oh, I'm drawn to this. I'm reaching for that. No, I pull my hand back. I'm not going to have that soft ice cream cone. Whatever it is for you, I just mentioned my own little weakness. No, I'm not going to do that. I know that only the first 10 seconds of that are going to be pleasurable anyway. The rest of it is simply a waste of my time. And therefore, am I going to throw away the cone or what? Now, this is all the thoughts that go along with Pratyahara, restraining the senses. Well, that's the outward reaching. Then we learn that within us, there is lots of sense information still there that doesn't require any stimulation from outside. It's self-generating inside. So we learn to control the sense organs, which is where the information from the senses goes. We learn to still those because they'll go to projection and memory, projection and memory, projection and memory. They'll jump right out of the moment time and time again. So all of these are our active practices. Now we get to dharana. Now we get to dharana, the practice of concentration. And in those other phases, you've found reasons to contemplate. Contemplate the higher truths that you've been taught and how they should replace the lower truths that represent the way you're acting, thinking, and speaking reflexively.
Brother Shankara.
Yes, dear.
Often the advice is meditate, 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 but it seems like that advice may be coming before people are actually ready to meditate, or can even possibly meditate, or understand what it even means.
This is the meditate, meditate, meditate is said by people like Brahmananda, or for that matter to Prabhavananda,
right.
to certain students. Not everyone, as you say, is going to be able to hear it. But you get to meditation through contemplation and concentration. Once you've learned what it means to meditate, then you can go directly to that square. Though oftentimes it's beneficial as you sit to practice, just to simply, for some minutes, just watch your mind. This is a different form of contemplation. You just sit, close your eyes, and watch where your mind is going. And so this is one of the ways we familiarize ourselves with the contents of our waking consciousness. And so as that happens, those things become, and we practice meditation, those things become automatically less significant to us, less deserving of our attention. And so we can just smile as we sit there saying, this chitta is full of all kinds of samskaras, all kinds of vrittis that are just not worthy of my attention. And occasionally there will be something that occurs to you. You'll remember something. Oh, I'm glad I remembered that. I'll make a mental note, or actually sometimes a physical note. I need to take care of that. I'd been neglecting or forgetting that. So occasionally something useful will come out of that as well. That's more likely to happen as you get older. And it's hard to remember where you put your car keys if you don't put them in the same place every time. So the fact is that meditate, meditate, meditate is for those people who have learned what meditation means. Yes, you're absolutely right. But it is an encouragement for us all to learn what that means. It's presenting the ideal. I mean, none of us would be inspired to learn to play tennis unless we saw really, really good tennis players. Then we think, wow, wouldn't it be wonderful to be able to backhand that ball, across court when your opponent is running this way, you can backhand the ball into the other corner. There are no ways they're going to get to it. So we need inspiration. Does that clear it up, Jenny?
Yes, it does. Very helpful.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Brother Shankara, this is
Yes. Yes, Haima. I know who it is.
I have one question. It's to reach Samadhi, do we have to do 12 times 2.24 seconds, or can we do all together like 27 minutes of total of 27 approximately? 12 times 2.24 is approximately 27 minutes. Can we do all at once?
I don't understand what you mean by all at once, dear.
I mean, each time you sit in meditation, instead of doing 2.24 seconds 12 times a day, can we do all 27 minutes at one time to get to Samadhi state? That's what I'm...
Well, for those who are skilled in meditation, for those who are truly skilled in meditation, they will go directly to meditation. And so if it's a good day, they will attain Samadhi. They will sustain it for 27 minutes and attain Samadhi. But even among the saints, dear, even Sri Ramakrishna wasn't continuously in Samadhi. He said you cannot keep your voice continuously on the highest note. So to those who, Samadhi is not that easy to come by, dear. To sustain meditation for 27 minutes, believe you me, it's for most of us normal human beings, including myself, it's a rare event indeed. But that doesn't mean it isn't worthy of our, just the road there is far more joyous than the other roads, the lesser roads.
Thank you.
We need to walk the lesser roads. There's no way out of it. We're in this experience, action, and experience suit. So we'll walk the lesser roads, but we walk them in a much more controlled way. We don't stray as much. We don't fall as often. We become a better and better dancer, as Sri Ramakrishna says, until you become an expert dancer that cannot put a foot wrong. But that's a long trail of winding.
Thank you so much.
A long and winding road to your door, so many times before. But the joy is that it becomes a little easier. It becomes a little freer. It becomes a little well, the Swami said, it's impossible to define or express. And that's true. So we have a choice. Unless there are another comment or question, we have the choice of going on to the next talk in the book, just the way it's listed in the book, which is Saints and Miracles, unless there is someone who has a particular talk in the book that you would like us to take up. Either way works perfect for me.
Brother Shankara, can I ask another question?
Yes, of course, dear, always.
And you may have covered this and I might have tuned out, but why are some more prone to feeling the pain of the collective consciousness?
Well, because you're born into this world having attained a certain level of evolution. And so you're born, though you're returning still, you're returning a league or so more down the road. And so your nervous system is going to be more sensitive. And some people are definitely born this way. And their sensitivity in the beginning, because they are so different from most other people, they feel like they've come from another planet or something. And in a sense, they have. They feel very different from everyone else. You can read about this. If you want to read about this, just read the autobiographical writings of Kurt Vonnegut. Kurt Vonnegut was a very great writer. And
spell that for me, Can you spell the name?
K-U-R-T, first name Kurt. Vonnegut, V-O-N-N-E-G-U-T. Kurt Vonnegut.
And what was the name of the?
Oh, I don't remember.
So just Google his name.
Just find his autobiographical writing.
Autobiography. Okay.
Yeah, he wrote novels, but he also wrote some autobiographical essays, and particularly when he was at the University of Iowa as an instructor, he taught writing there for a number of years, and he worked with one of his students, who was a creative writing student, actually changed majors and became a psychology major so that she could study Kurt Vonnegut and his family. Because of this, she was exploring the connection between sensitivity and creativity. But sensitivity in itself is not a marker for creativity. It's just that they often go together. And it makes perfect sense, you see. You've come a long way. You're reborn into this life, as Krishna says, to an appropriate family. You've come a long way in your search for Brahman, in your attempt at yoga. And this Krishna says, Arjuna asks, what happens if you do that? If you fall from the path of yoga before you leave the body? And of course, Arjuna, being a drama queen, quite dramatizes what will happen. Oh, you'll be separated from everything. You'll have no home here or in the afterlife. And Krishna, in one of the few times that he addresses him this way in the Gita, says, no, my son, that's not how it works. But when you're born into this body that is manifesting this high level of sensitivity, it isn't always, particularly when you're younger, you don't necessarily see it as a blessing.
Yeah, and the world also considers people like that weak, those who feel the pain of others to be weak sometimes.
Yes, it's one of the very unfortunate things that they see people who are sensitive as weak, or as you've nailed it. Anything else?
Thank you.
So you had mentioned, this brings another topic. You had mentioned that as we evolve spiritually, we become more sensitive.
Yes.
And that's a two-edged sword, isn't it? Because
yes. Everything is a two-edged sword, Brahmadas. That's the nature of duality.
Mm-hmm.
There's no such thing in the universe, according to Vivekananda's testimony in Jnana Yoga. There is no such thing in the universe that is one thing or the other. It may be predominantly one thing or the other, but it is alloyed with the other. So your question is?
It's more of a comment.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it's like since taking Diksha and meditation, I've noticed that I can pay attention to speakers better, for example, and I appreciate fine art and fine music more. I'm noticing that, but I'm also noticing like some mental pain that Naveen had mentioned, and that's there too. And you know, when somebody hurts your feelings or says something, it seems to have more of a bite than it used to. So it's a two-edged sword.
Yes, and this is one of the reasons.
I used to love The Long and Winding Road, by the way. It's still a great song.
It's a great song, yes. The fact that the world's ability to inflict pain can reach us more and reach us more deeply means we must take refuge. We must take refuge in spiritual
right, exactly.
Spiritual practice. And if you want to know what I mean in detail, read Swami Vivekananda's Song of the Sannyasi. He details it, and he's very explicit. And sannyasins aren't only those who wear orange robes. Everyone on this, who's represented on this screen this morning, is a sannyasin. A sannyasin is one who's making an effort to leave the world behind, leave the world of action and experience behind, and manifest the world of knowledge and realization.
Is Song of the Sannyasin in his complete works? I have that.
Oh yes, oh yes.
Okay. And you spell Sannyasin S-A-N-Y-A-S-I-N? Or is there two N's?
I think there's two N's. S-A-N-N, Sanya, Y-A-S-I-N. Sannyas, two N's.
Cool.
The problem is that if you don't take refuge in a spiritual life, you might end up self-medicating some other way.
Precisely, and
yeah.
that's what most people do, Jenny. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, I think that's a trap we can all easily fall into, and it's a dangerous trap.
And that's that's why there is an anonymous 12-step program for every one of those addictions, every one of those self-medications that people fall into.
In fact, I've heard from several sources that during COVID-19 lockdown, drug and alcohol abuse has really gone way up because a lot of people aren't coping with this well.
I've heard that too.
And they're having to face themselves in ways that they haven't had to face themselves otherwise.
We all are.
Yeah. So it's still an open question what we're going to go on to next. Does anyone have a recommendation, or shall we just go on to the talk on saints and miracles? Any vote?
I think all of them are so good that it doesn't really matter, and if we just take them in order, it's fine.
Thank you, Jenny. That I find myself agreeing with that. But if someone else does have something that they particularly want to study, we can do that too. All right, then. We'll go on with saints and miracles. Let's see how much time we have left. Well, we only have 4 minutes. So, well, we'll read the first paragraphs or two, the first several paragraphs of Saints and Miracles. Let me remind you that this is a talk that Swami Prabhavananda gave many times, and Nalini, Edith Tipple, took the transcripts of each of those times that he gave that talk from 1936, or 38, I'm sorry, 1938 to 1976. She took the transcript of each time he gave that talk, compared them, and selected the best from each of those iterations. And so we have the real cream of Swami Prabhavananda's thoughts on any particular subject here. Because Edith Tipple is very sincere and long-time devotee from the 50s of Swami Prabhavananda, and very deep in her practice and very hardworking. So she's the one who produced this book by distilling each of these topics out of all of the times that the Swami had given the talk. That's why when you're reading the book, like at the end of the talk we just read, it says 42 at the end. If you go to the back of the book, you'll find that the 42 refers to a particular time that the Swami gave that talk. And so that was taken from that particular time. She was very, very good at indexing. Saints and miracles. You will find that all the great teachers and saints of the world claim to have seen God, to have talked with him, to have reached union with him. And certainly it's true, that's true of every one of those saints. It's in that book, Love Poems from God. Every one of them is conversant, that is, face-to-face conversant with the divine presence. Talked with him, reached union with him. For instance, Christ spoke with authority, not as the scribes and the Pharisees. Where did he get that authority? He had reached union with God. We find Buddha saying, Brahman I know and live in the Brahman world. So when people say that Buddha didn't talk about God, he just didn't talk about the lesser aspects of God in his estimation. He just said we were not going to fool around with those things that are so easily monkeyed with in priestcraft. So he said, Buddha I know and live in the Brahman world. In this age, when the young Swami Vivekananda approached Ramakrishna and asked, Sir, have you seen God? Ramakrishna replied, yes, I have seen him, and he is more real than I see you, and everyone can see him. Notice that in his very first talk with Vivekananda, he made that promise that over and over we find. This isn't just something for me. You can do it too. Everyone who makes the effort can do it. Yes, I have seen him, and he is more real than I see you, and everyone can see him. That is the truth emphasized since the most ancient time of the Vedas and the Upanishads. That truth that you can see the divine. You can have that living experience of the divine. The point is that nobody has seen God with these eyes or has heard the voice of God with these ears. But we read in the Bible, he who hath ears to see, sees, and he who hath ears to hear, hears. We turn within, and we find that we have a different set of eyes, a different set of ears. As Meister Eckhart, the great Catholic mystic, said, the eye with which I see God, the eye with which I see God is the same eye with which God sees me. He who hath eyes to hear, eyes to see, sees, and he who hath ears to hear, hears. It is a new vision. In yoga psychology and in the Upanishads, it is brought out that within this three states of consciousness that we are familiar with, waking, dreaming, and dreamless sleep, the reality of God cannot be known or experienced. What? Then he goes on to explain. We have to go beyond the three states of consciousness. This is the state that we access in meditation, where we are slipping towards samadhi. we have to go beyond the waking, dreaming, and dreamless sleep, that state which transcends the senses, and the ordinary mind is known as the fourth, in Sanskrit, turiya. The mind has to become purified, completely freed from all past impressions and thoughts. What? Completely freed? By that it means they don't intrude. They become dormant. They become dormant. It isn't that they vanish. In Nirvikalpa Samadhi, when you achieve Nirvikalpa Samadhi, they are burnt to ash, it is said, by the fire of knowledge, or melted away in a different metaphor used by Shankara. They melt back into the formless. But you have to be completely freed from all past impressions and thoughts. It means that they don't intrude. Otherwise, you can't meditate. Meditation, as long as those past impressions and thoughts are intruding, they will interrupt your concentration enough that you are not able to slip into meditation. That is what Christ meant when he said, "Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God." Now, seeing God is Savikalpa Samadhi. It's not Nirvikalpa Samadhi. Seeing is still a dualistic experience. But believe me, it is well worth your effort to attain, because it completely changes your frame of reference once you understand that that's what you are. You are a part of that which you have experienced. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. To see God is literally a truth, and that is religion. It appears as supernatural, as a miraculous phenomenon, and so the idea of saints and miracles have become, as it were, synonymous. And we'll leave it at that for this week. It's a few minutes after noon. If anybody would like to make a comment or a question, there's time. Anyone?
Brother Shankara?
Yes, Swayam?
I think we sort of touched upon the gender issues during last week's Gita class.
Mm-hmm.
So when Sri Ramakrishna says, "Yes, I have seen God, I have seen him," is that just a matter of convention that him
Yes.
is?
Yes. If you read Bengali, go read the Bengali. You'll see it's not quite as we know that Sri Ramakrishna's Ishta Devata was Kali. His chosen ideal was Kali. Ishwara and Ishwari are identical. This is why Sri Ramakrishna said that he and Holy Mother were identical. They were just one being, one formless, nameless being in two name and form, Ishwara and Ishwari, Bhagavan, Bhagavani. They come so that we can recognize them. From a standing start, it's hard enough to recognize Bhagavan and Bhagavani, let alone the formless. So they take, as Sri Ramakrishna said, they take form due to the cooling influence of the love of the devotee. Out of the formless form these forms, due to the cooling influence, like icebergs forming in the ocean. Actually, we now know that icebergs don't actually form in the ocean. Icebergs are calved from great glaciers, but in Sri Ramakrishna's time, it was thought that they actually did, the water froze and created icebergs. And of course, that is to an extent true. Great masses of ice will form in the wintertime in the far north and then break up in the spring. So there are chunks of ice floating around.
So with that question, Brother Shankara,
Yes.
isn't Prakriti, the creative force, thought as feminine?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
There is some sense of female.
Well, Swami Vivekananda, after 3 days spent continuously in having lost outer consciousness for 3 days, he returned to say, I believe there is a force in the universe, and I believe that it is feminine, and her name is Kali. Mm-hmm. He had that experience. This is, after all, the Kali Yuga. So that is who is immanent if we move in that direction. Dakshina Kali, the benign form of Kali. Yes, the Swami Vivekananda said it would be the women who led this work forward, particularly in the West. It would be the women who led this work forward. The divine feminine would rise up, make itself. And I think you've all heard me talk about a book by the name of, the author's name is Hannah Rosen, Hannah, Hannah Rosen, Rosin. And the name of the book is The End of Men and the Rise of Women. By the end of men, she means the end of patriarchy. That patriarchy is ending and being replaced by a more balanced, well, actually, it's balanced. The scale is tipped already in her very informed estimation toward the feminine. The End of Men and the Rise of Women, Hannah Rosen. If you don't want to be bothered with the book right away, you can find her TED Talk on the internet, as well as a talk that she gave in England to one of the royal societies. I forget which one it was, maybe anthropology. In any case, it's kind of interesting because one of the men who is the, so to speak, moderator for, you can tell he gets a little ruffled by what she says. And she very gently but firmly puts him in his place. It's really kind of sweet. So you can find her on the internet if you don't want to be troubled with the book. Anything else? All right, dears. So we'll end it with this. Oh, dearly beloved, a flower at your feet for each one who comes to your open door. A flower at your feet for each one who stands by your open door and says, come to me, offering to break this world's chain that binds us down to ignorance, suffering, and death. A flower at your feet for each one who takes the path that you have struck through this, your jungle world. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Amen. Peace, peace. Peace be unto us and to all joyous and suffering beings everywhere. So until tomorrow morning, for those of you who decide to join us, The topic tomorrow morning is Raja Yoga and your spiritual practice. I think you'll find it a little surprising if you find time to come. It's not going to be your average bear. Anything else from anyone before we sign off?
Well, thank you so much, brother. Be well.
Thank you.
You're
Thank you,
so
Brother Shankara.
very welcome, dears. All
Thank
right.
you.
I'm gonna close it out then. Until next time.
Yes. Be well.
Be well yourself.